again, everyone. Patrick Fingston of the Illinois.com here. Wanted to talk to candidates in the 13th Congressional District primaries. Terry Martin, a longtime journalist who operates the nonprofit Illinois Channel, kind of an online / cable state C-SPAN sort of thing. Terry, welcome. You've got a lot of experience in and around the halls of government. What would make you jump into a race for Congress?
Patrick, thanks for having me. You know, I after so many years of covering it and having friends on both sides of the aisle, covering Washington, when I was with C-SPAN, covering the Illinois State Legislature for 20 years or more, frankly, closer to 25. It's just that so many things were going wrong and so many things were going crazy that I just thought we are destroying the country here. We have an open border. We have all of this effort to teach sex ed and kindergartners and first grade. We have the economy falling off the table, the war on fossil fuels. And, you know, I'm of the opinion that Joe Biden, and I've been covering politics and watching it for longer than I've covered it, Joe Biden's the worst president in my lifetime. His cabinet is an editorial I just read last night, is a confederacy of dunces. And I just couldn't stand back and not share what I knew and just continue to want to report on it in a nonpartisan fashion. So I may or may not win, but I wanted to be able to share my views that I've developed over the last 30 years of covering politics at the national and state level.
Obviously, with the shooting at school in Texas and mass shootings continue to be a bane of our society here in America. And you know, I've said to your fellow candidates as well as others, I'm a pro-gun guy. I'm a farm kid. I grew up with guns, but I also understand that this is a clear problem. So let me, instead of just, you know, giving you an opportunity to say I'm pro Second Amendment, which every Republican candidate is going to tell me, let me ask you this. What's the need for an AR-15? What's the need for something that shoots 5.56, which, you know, tears the bodies of these poor little children apart? I mean, what's the need?
Well, let me preface it by saying I'm not much of a gun guy. I'm not anti-gun. I am pro-Second Amendment from a philosophical standpoint. And there's a lot I don't know about guns. So, you know, I'm not the kind of guy that can talk caliber and all that. The need when you talk about an AR-15, and I actually wrote a piece where I put my thoughts down in kind of a longer piece on Terry Martin for Congress on Facebook that people may want to look at. But as I said in there, just to paraphrase myself, the people that say we don't need guns for protection because we have police are the same people that turn around and say we ought to defund police. They're the same people that have the border wide open to allow every MS-13 member to come into the United States. They're the same people that when rioters are breaking windows and burning buildings, you had the mayor of Chicago telling the police to stand down. We had the riots in Kenosha, in Portland, Oregon, in Minnesota, and other places. So the need is to protect your family. And you don't want to be facing a crowd rioting, as we've seen in Kenosha and other places, with a six-shooter. It's not so you can go in and shoot children. It's so that if you're being attacked by a mob, and sadly, we've witnessed this, that's what it's for. It's not deer hunting, it's for personal protection.
But there are people going in and shooting children. And I think that's the overarching point and the overarching concern here is that literally children are being murdered for doing nothing more than going to school. So if it's not the gun per se, then what would you support? Is it a larger red flag law? Is it universal background checks? Is it waiting periods? What's the answer in your mind to keep guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them?
Well, let me start off and I'll answer the question, but I want to preface to say I didn't jump into the race for Congress so I could talk about gun issues. Now, it is an issue, and I would be voting on it, so it's a fair question. But that said, I want to do what works. Now, relative to schools, for the $40 billion we sent to Ukraine, we could have hardened every school in America. We could have automatic door locks. We could have where you have to be buzzed in. We could have cameras in the schools for security cameras.
So this isn't about foreign aid, though. This is the Ukraine situation, and schools are not the same issue here. So I don't see the parallel.
Well, the parallel is the point is we spent $40 billion for Ukraine. I'm not opposed to aid from Ukraine. I'm just making an example that for that same amount of money, we could have hardened every school in America. And the other thing is we had the police in Texas standing around for an hour. We should have a requirement that every police force has, just like we have fire drills, practices with the schools on a active shooter drill. And every police force should have a blueprint of those facilities that could be under attack, the schools, the city halls, other units that conceivably could be exposed, so that if something happens, the school could say, we have a shooter in classroom 5, and the police will know what that means because they have a blueprint available and they've already worked with the schools, and they're not going to be arriving someplace that they had never had any contact with. And before the police arrive, the school district will know what the drill was because they had practiced it with the police.
So obviously one of the other main issues out there right now is on abortion. It looks like the court's going to overturn Roe if we are to believe the leaked opinion that came out a couple of weeks ago. If the court sends this back to the states, what would you see in Congress as the role of Congress, as the role of Washington in this situation?
They won't have a role. I mean, that's kind of the point of the decision I think we're going to have coming down. It's going to be returned to the states. Instead of federalizing Roe v. Wade, it'll be as it was beforehand. I was in high school before Roe, and people would go to different states that had abortion and other states didn't. But this is more democratic in terms of democracy because, as we saw with the Illinois legislature this spring, they passed a law that said they're going to continue to have abortion on demand. Now the Illinois voters can vote for the lawmakers and vote to support that or not, but it won't be beyond the vote of the local citizens because it's been decided by 9 justices of the Supreme Court. So this is frankly more democratic, but Congress won't have a role in that.
Should it though, when the Hyde Amendment or whether it's a late term ban or something along those lines that Congress has stepped in on before?
It's a good question. So the Hyde Amendment says that we shouldn't be using tax dollars to pay for abortion services, and so you're right. And I correct myself. In that sense, Congress would have a role in that kind of and so I would support maintaining the Hyde Amendment. And yes, tangentially, there could be these roles. Personally, I think also we should recognize in this discussion that we've had 50 years pass virtually of improvements in medicine and what we know about keeping babies in the womb alive at an earlier age. So that all said, I think that we should not have abortion on demand. We should have exceptions for rape and incest and for the right to protect the life of the mother. But I think generally speaking, we should not have lawful abortions except for those exclusions. The life of the mother would be certainly that after the first trimester. And let's also admit that we have a lot more use of birth control these days. And with the birth control, the improvements that have been made over the last 50 years, if people are just a bit more responsible, we're not going to have the need for abortions. they should be declining. It used to be that it was the last resort and it wasn't supposed to be used for birth control.
Let's move on really quickly since we mentioned Ukraine a few minutes ago. Obviously, the Russian invasion and slow takeover of that country is of concern to many. Congress, of course, has the federal jurisdiction on foreign policy and those sort of things. So let's talk really quickly about what you see as the U.S. role in this situation. Is there a point that we should put boots on the ground? Should we be fast tracking Ukraine into NATO or the EU, where they become, an Article 5 sort of ally? What should be done to help Ukraine defend itself?
I think, no, we should not put boots on the ground, and no, I would not put Ukraine into NATO. I think if you look back to the lessons of the First World War, you had those entanglements that all of a sudden everyone had to jump into a fight, and boom, you had 30 countries fighting each other in short order. So what we should be doing is what we're doing is as President Trump did. He sent them the weapons that they had available because he sent them to them when this fighting started. The United States should defend them. And let's admit, President Trump was also right when he was forcing NATO to say to Germany and France and the other nations, you guys are defense mutuals. You need to pony up and put your money in that you said you would. So now NATO has more resources, and NATO, the Europeans, should be putting more money in, as well as us, to defend another nation that is under attack. But we mentioned $40 billion that the Congress just approved for Ukraine. The Europeans, who are on the same continent with Ukraine, are not putting in anywhere near that, number one. And number two, we should recognize we're going to have a horrific humanity crisis as far as trying to feed and clothe and house the Ukrainian people whenever the fighting stops. So I would have given money. I would have voted for some money. I would not have wanted $40 billion. I think $10 billion would probably have been more than enough, and to have some funds available for the humanitarian needs that we're going to be facing and are already facing.
Quickly here, Terry, on the economy and inflation, which is obviously hitting regular folks really hard right now. Just look at gas prices, $5 a gallon downstate, almost $6 a gallon in the city and suburbs right now, just for regular unleaded. It's causing real people real problems. So from a federal level, what's your support? Is it a temporary repeal of the federal gas tax? Is it strategic petroleum reserves? What's the immediate help for consumers right now?
Yeah, well, there isn't any. The ball's in Biden's court here. The Congress can't force Biden's hand. Now, the answer is Biden could give immediate help, not through the gimmicks, not through taking money out of or oil out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, not going on bended knee to the Saudis or Venezuela or some other dictator. Biden could just say, I'm going to reverse myself. I'm going to tell my Energy Department and my Interior Department to push forward the oil permitting as ASAP. I'm going to reopen areas that I took offline as far as drilling under executive order. And if he did that, the oil futures would precipitously drop, and we would overnight have cheaper gasoline. Gas, the price of oil, I should say, is a domino effect in our economy. So I don't expect Biden is going to do that. I do expect that when the Republicans come in, as they will in November, that if we could force Biden's hand to drill more, drilling is what we need to do. And my policy first of all, if we produce more oil, that will bring the price of not only oil down, it'll bring the price of everything else down that went up because of the huge cost that they have to add for delivery. Everything's brought to us by trucks in whatever store we go to. It wasn't born there. So that's the key component here. And we need to have I would say, a dual policy going forward. Yes, we can do research on wind and solar, and I've done quite a lot of research on energy issues. There's some very interesting research going on right now in the energy field that would ultimately replace fossil fuels. So I'm not wedded to fossil fuels, but I am adamantly against pulling the rug out from under the American economy when we have 80% or more of our energy coming from fossil fuels, number one. Number two, wind and solar are never going to cut it as a replacement for fossil fuels. And people should understand that the technology does not yet exist for the storage of massive quantities of electricity. So when you lose, I should say, when you lose solar, as we do every night, we can't run subway systems. We can't power elevators in Chicago, with car batteries. So it's just been irresponsible, this push by the Illinois legislature and some members in Congress on this war on fossil fuels, because they don't currently have a replacement. Unless you want to go with nuclear, and that is something that's a carbon-free source that is reliable, that is 24/7, but the environmentalists don't want to have nuclear either. So really, they're being highly irresponsible.
Terry Martin, candidate for Congress. Terry, appreciate it. Where can folks find you on the internet?
They can find me at terrymartinforcongress.com. I'm going to look at my own cheat sheet because I don't write myself. Email me at martinforcongress2022@gmail, and on Twitter at terrymartin2022, although I'm not much of a Twitter guy. But Patrick, thank you so much for the invitation to join you. Look forward to hearing more from you and your coverage, and congratulations on your newsletter.
Happy to be joined by Regan Deering, who's from Decatur, running for that Republican slot in the new 13th district, what was Rodney Davis's old district, and then kind of got redrawn and gerrymandered into what Democrats hope is a district that favors them. Regan, you're a Decaturite. What made you want to get into a race for Congress?
Well, thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity to reach some of your followers here today. Yes, I am sort of a political outsider and decided that I, as a mom and educator, were concerned about the future of my children and my grandchildren. So some of the issues that have been front of mind for me, and I don't feel like are being handled well at the federal level, kind of gave me that passion to jump into this race. As you mentioned, it's an open seat, as our current Congressman Rodney Davis is being mapped into the 15th Congressional District. So felt it was a good opportunity to get a representative here in Central and Southern Illinois that's more connected to we the people and is facing some of these same issues in their own lives, and know that I would be somebody that would advocate for myself and families here.
Decatur's a place that's obviously had its economic frustrations in recent years. What do you think the federal government's role in building back traditional manufacturing hubs in places like Decatur is that government's job? Can a member of Congress do that?
Well, we certainly all have a role to play, and I do think that the federal government and a lot of their over-regulation and over-taxation and just, quite frankly, over-inserting themselves into our everyday lives has had a big role on the destruction of some of our communities and our industries, as is evidenced here in Central Illinois. I know that I have been a small business owner here in Decatur and have spent the last several years working for a nonprofit that is trying, in fact, to lift people up. And I do think that the hindrances coming down from our government does feel like sort of an assault on all of us. And so I know that myself as a representative wants to be able to go and find good policy, good funding that we can bring back to the 13th Congressional District to continue to grow our economies and have families keeping more money in their own pocketbooks, things like that.
So I want to get into issues in the time that we have, just so that folks know where you stand. I think we have to start the conversation on guns. Just considering the atmosphere that we're in, especially following Buffalo and Uvalde, and I've always been clear that I'm a pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment guy, but I also favor restrictions to keep guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. What does that mean for you? And I know it's hard in a Republican primary to come out and say I'm anything but, strap an AR-15 to your back and run around saying I'm pro Second Amendment. But let's talk real, honest to God policy here. How do we make life safer for children, for regular people, without infringing on the rights of people who do own guns legally?
Yeah, I do think that is a conversation that needs to be happening more regularly when we find ourselves in a news cycle that has a lot of emotion running high. And that seems to be the time that legislatures come out and talk at their televisions and try and reach the American people to say, when is it going to be enough? When are we going to have good legislation? And it's refreshing to hear that current congressmen and women are coming to the table and talking about how we find the exact balance that you described, and that we do need to support our Second Amendment and our legal gun owners. But we also need to have that conversation about good legislation that's actually getting to some of the root of the problem, how we can try and find ourselves limiting those with evil intentions having access to guns. I mean, our country has a lot of legal guns that are in our system. Of course, we have illegal guns that do show up when we have things like an open border. That's not helping the process either. But, I think there needs to be multiple strings to the conversation. We need to talk about the mental health piece, the morality of this country. Gun violence is an everyday occurrence in our country. It's heartbreaking to turn on the news now, where it seems as though we've talked about mass shootings, which are 4 people or more injured or killed in a situation, and it's all across this country. And so I do think as a legislator, I want to come from a common sense place that does respect individual freedoms and individual rights. But as humans, we need to find a better way to combat the problem.
What are you open to? Is it a stronger red flag system? Is it universal background checks? Is it raising the age to buy a 5.56 caliber rifle to 21? Is it a ban? Is it a longer waiting period? Illinois has a 72-hour waiting period, and it hasn't really infringed on my life, particularly in any time that I've ever purchased a weapon. So what do you, in a common sense fashion, what can you support?
Well, I think that you've mentioned all the key talking points that come out of the Democratic agenda. I think that we have good laws on the books, and we need to keep criminals in jail, and we need to keep people who are breaking the law in jail and not having access. I've read too many heartbreaking stories about gun violence, maybe not in the example of mass shootings, but of shootings in Chicago or shootings in other communities where we have people on parole and we have people who have had their third strike. So I think that we do need to take a look at illegal access to guns by ill-intentioned people. I mean, the legislation that you mentioned, I'm not for red flag laws. I mean, universal background checks, we have a pretty good system in place right now. Criminals, by definition, are breaking the laws. So it seems a little challenging to talk about just making new law after new law, which hasn't been working in the past. So I'd like to talk about legislation that's going to help get to the root of the problem. And we need, stronger DAs. We need stronger consequences for actions of people that do have gun violence records.
I want to move to abortion quickly. Obviously, the whole narrative on the topic changed when the Supreme Court had a draft opinion leak. We don't know whether that's final or what's going to happen with it specifically, but I think there's a general thought that Roe will be overturned. Is this a federal issue to you? And if the court kicks it out to either the states or Congress, is it a federal issue or should the states handle it?
Well, I'm saddened by the leak in general out of the Supreme Court. It kind of takes a chink in the armor of that institution, which I think is on a slippery slope. But on this particular issue, I do have some hope for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I do believe that it's a state's issue. And I believe that elections have consequences. I live in the state of Illinois, where I don't agree with the majority of the legislation that's coming out at our state level, but that's what happens when you have elected officials that vote. And so I do know that for me personally, I mean, I'm forever grateful to be adopted at birth myself. So that gift of life and that gift of choice by my birth mother and giving me a chance to live out a wonderful life myself and for my family is something that I want to honor every single day. So I think that I think it is a state's issue. I think it's where it belongs. I've read a lot of statistics and language about polling and things that our citizens here in Illinois believe. We have a governor and a state legislature that is passing bills that allow late-term abortion. And so I really do want to have the conversation about women's reproductive health care. I was just speaking this morning with a gentleman out of Sidewalks of Hope. So we do have passionate people on both sides. And I think that the focus does need to be on giving women access to high quality reproductive health care, meeting women in crisis or who are finding themselves and their partner in an unplanned pregnancy. I'd like to see us spend more federal dollars to supporting the women in wraparound services. I definitely at the federal level would like to reinstate the Hyde Amendment, which eliminates federal funding for abortion services. And I'd like to see a better balance of dollars, if they are in fact going to come from the federal level, to be supporting women in their choice that they do make.
Where do you see the abortion issue lie? Is it, there's a very Christian feeling of life begins at conception no matter what. There's the viability question. As a new dad, I heard the baby's heartbeat for the first time at 8 weeks, and you couldn't tell me that wasn't a life at 6 or 8 weeks. So where do you see this discussion? Is it conception? Is it viability? Where is it? And at what role then is it wrong to terminate a pregnancy?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, being a parent myself, there's nothing like hearing that heartbeat. And as I mentioned earlier, I would like to see women choose life when they can. I mean, I personally, as someone that is a pro-life candidate with exceptions for, the life of the mother, or we have rape or incest exceptions, which I think is pretty well in line with most voters, if you will, when we're doing some of that polling. And I read an interesting article about, safe abortions and that there's, less than 1% chance of death. But when I read that, I think there's 100% chance of death for a newborn or an infant when you are talking about that argument. So for me, as a woman of faith, I know that I want to do everything that I can to continue to support women in making a choice that will promote life.
Before I let you go, we have to talk about the economy, which starts with gas prices, because that's the top thing hitting people in the pocketbook right now. In the state of Illinois, regular gasoline, regular unleaded is over $5 almost everywhere statewide at this point, pushing $6 or higher for regular unleaded in Chicago and parts of the suburbs. What can the federal government do about that? Is it a part-time repeal of the federal gas tax? Is it ANWR or strategic petroleum reserves? There's clearly an issue with production. If there's not enough supply out there that's driving up price, it's Econ 101. But obviously it's more than just that. Summer blend and biofuels plays a role into this too, with ethanol, which is an issue that I've worked on previously in my career, and you guys know a lot about with Decatur and ADM. So how do you walk into Congress potentially in January of 2023 and gas prices are still $4, $5, $6 a gallon? How can Congress make a difference?
Well, yes to all of those things you just mentioned. As somebody that is well connected to these options that we have, I mean, it just feels like the government isn't doing all that they can for the people when we can't afford to put gas in our tanks. I mean, it's hurting everyone. I was talking with a single mom who said, I work for a local nonprofit here in Decatur, and we're primarily a food pantry, but we also offer some emergency funding. And she was coming for a food box so that it could lessen the burden on her grocery budget so that she could put more gas in her tank to get to work. And so it seems like a vicious cycle, because when she's squeezed that much and then can't get enough gas to get to work, then she loses a paycheck. And then there's obviously an impact. So every American is feeling the pinch at the pump. I just can't believe that we are now over $5 with no end in sight. Sometimes every day is a new record high. And so I think we do need to look at multi-pronged federal action. Obviously, we need to be able to create our energy independence. I mean, to think that we've doubled the amount of gas in just under 2 years is just mind-boggling. So there are a lot of things at play, ANWR, we've got drilling, we've got leasing, we have pipelines. I just feel like the federal government has to do a better job at their forward thinking and knowing we've got committees and we've got experts, and are they really being heard when we've got gas prices that are up over $5? I mean, we have war, in the Russia-Ukraine that's obviously having effects on the supply and demand and the access, and what does it look like when we're going to other countries. But everyday Americans know they can't afford it, and as legislators, it's our job to make sure that we're sitting around the table with all those who have great expertise about it and considering all the options, and that's a table I want to be at.
You mentioned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. At what point do members of Congress, in your mind, say we as the United States have to step in as long as this issue continues to drag on and innocent civilians in Ukraine are in times being slaughtered at worst, or having their homes destroyed, or their cities flattened? At what point does the United States have to step up and say, this may not be on NATO's plate yet, but it needs to be on ours?
Well, and I think it has been on ours. The Biden administration has sent millions and billions of dollars of resources and military equipment and humanitarian aid. And, there isn't a solution at the point. This comes down to negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. And I think that the American people, from those that I'm talking to now, say, when are we going to direct those $40 million back at our country? We have big problems here. We are not taking care of our own. And so while we, of course, are always going to support humanitarian efforts and military efforts that can help maintain the life of innocent Ukrainians that are caught in the middle, and Russians as well, I think that we need to prioritize better. And myself, I know that as a fiscal conservative, it's hard to talk to voters who just see the dollar signs leaving our country when we have issues to tackle right here at home.
Regan Deering, candidate for Congress. How do people find your campaign?
So the website is Regan4Congress.com. We've got the ability for them to sign up and stay engaged in activities throughout the 13th district. We have meet and greets, we have fundraising events. We would love for them to get to know me. Like I mentioned to you earlier before we were online, I have had connections through Facebook and Twitter that we've reached out and had some individual Zooms and coffee dates. So my favorite place is on the trail and meeting with voters and knowing that I am looking for solutions to make their life better here in the 13th.
Regan Deering, thanks so much. We move now to Matt Houseman, who's from rural Champaign County. He's running for the 13th Congressional District, the Republican nomination. Matt, welcome. Thanks for the time. Why would you have an interest, a guy who seemingly has a lot of success in private business and some non-for-profits too? Why get into this messy world of politics?
Well, thanks for the chance to talk with you, Patrick. I appreciate it. And yeah, that's a question I get a lot, is the why. And the reason is simply we are not on a good path as a country. I think we are way too divided as a country, and it doesn't seem like we have a whole lot of voice trying to bring us together. I want to bring the country and the people of 13th District, Republicans and Democrats, I want to try to bring people together. I don't want to be somebody who's just going to tell people what they want to hear on my side of the aisle, which it seems so many of our politicians want to do, because then at the end of the day, nothing can get done, and except for maybe some special interests. But the everyday Americans across the country and in the 13th District they're the ones that get left behind.
That's not something you hear a lot in a primary.
Right, it's not, but I also don't want to be one of those politicians that, okay, I'm going to go right to the Republican base and try to fire them up in the primary. And then now I'm going to have to pivot and try to run a different strategy in the general. I want to be here's what I am, what you see is what you get, and not have to be that change, the kind of that typical strategy. Now, obviously, I'm going to emphasize different issues and things, and try to appeal to different aspects of my personality and my platform in a primary versus a general, but it's always going to be the same.
Do you think that helps you in a general, maybe compared to the other three candidates in the race, that if you do get out of the primary, that you don't have to shake that Etch-a-Sketch quite as hard to have a clean slate?
Exactly, because then if I were fortunate enough to make it through the primary and face the Democratic opponent, I can say that, hey, I was willing to stand up for these same values, even against in a primary election. I'm willing to stand up for what I believe in to my own side as well as to the opposing side, because I want to work for all of the 13th district.
So let's talk about some of those issues then, and I think we need to start with guns. You know, you and I are both rural kids, so we maybe have a different understanding and expectation of guns. As we had a 30-06 in the cabinet right in when you walk in the door. It's right. It's a different world than the suburbs or the city. But you look at what happened in Texas, you look at the mass shootings, you look at the fact that there are innocent children who are being killed. Do we, even pro-gun Republicans, is it time for the party to step back and say, we do need to do something to limit access to some of these high-powered rifles, whether you want to agree that you should have an AR-15 or not? A 5.56 is a devastating round. So what should be done to help maybe cure some of these ills with, obviously mental health is going to be a part of it, but there is a gun issue there too.
Right. And I think you hit that too when you said access, and that's the key. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. As you mentioned, rural kid, I grew up learning to shoot on a 22 and a 12 gauge. And that's just what we grew up with. And part of that is when you have that culture, you can have both. I always point to Switzerland. Switzerland is one that has a strong gun culture, but they respect guns and they have common sense regulation. So I support the Second Amendment. I oppose gun bans, but I do support things that 80% of the country supports, things like extended background checks, red flag laws, possible age restrictions, or at least age requirements and parental signing off when somebody wants to purchase a weapon. Things like that have broad bipartisan support from the general public. And we as Republicans need to recognize that, yes, mental health is an issue. I'm on the county mental health board. I deal with mental health issues and care about mental health issues beyond just whenever there's a mass shooting. I care about it for a long time. And even when it's under the radar. So, but we do need to understand and acknowledge that these guns are just too easily accessible for dangerous hands, including people who have mental health issues and aren't quite processing things correctly, like these 18-year-old that have perpetrated these shootings.
I do want to ask about abortion too. Just we've seen that the Supreme Court had the leaked ruling, potential decision that could come out as early as this month. Obviously, if the decision holds, it would kick the abortion issue back to the states. Do you see a role for the federal government on the abortion issue if the Supreme Court does kick this back?
Potentially. I'd have to look at details. I am pro-life, so I would oppose any efforts at the federal level to codify Roe v. Wade, which I know there's an effort to do that, so I would oppose that. When we're talking about, some have talked about federal ban on abortion, I would have to look at the details of that. I do support exceptions for like the health and the life of the mother. But even though I'm pro-life and strongly pro-life, also it would look at, because I don't necessarily believe at the moment of fertilization, I'm more around the heartbeat time frame. Because if you start talking about fertilization, then you get into sketchy details when you're talking about IVF treatments and things like that. But even though abortion seems like it's an either or, you're either pro-life or pro-choice, I do think there's room for us to come together as a country, because when you look at it, we need to make sure, even if abortion is outlawed, you see it in countries all over the world. You see it in the US before Roe v. Wade, a lot of women still would go and try to find ways to have abortions. So what we really need to do, both sides of the aisle, try to minimize that demand for abortion. So that means increasing access to contraception, making sure we have better services for women and families, better adoption services, and making that easier for people to try to, again, reduce the demand for abortion, because that's the key. I don't want to just be pro-life by being anti-Roe v. Wade. I want to truly be pro-life across the board.
And obviously economically, we're facing tough times at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
where folks are having a hard time putting gas in their tank. It's $5 a gallon in a lot of downstate, $6 a gallon in the city and suburbs right now for regular unleaded. I'm sure it's that much or more for putting diesel in a pickup.
Oh yeah,
down in Pasodum, and it's it's a real hassle on bottom lines. And I'm sure that there are families out there who have to choose between going to work and what they get at the grocery store. So again, we're talking about the federal side here.
Mm-hmm.
What should be done? A temporary repeal of the federal gas tax, an expansion of the strategic petroleum reserves. What can be done to provide people with relief immediately?
So that key word at the end is the real crux of the issue, is getting them the support immediately. So the issue with the gas tax and people talking about a gas tax holiday, unfortunately, what I've read, it seems like that is just a kicking the can down the road. We would be paying for that long term, whether that be with higher taxes or something like that. So I would have to look at the proposal specifically to see how they would offset those things, because we do want to reduce the pain on the families at the pump. Those kinds of issues, trying to make sure we have subsidized maybe fuel cards for low income families, things like that might be a potential issue to help immediately. But long term, we got to look at how we prevent this beyond just now. We got to look how we prevent this year in the future as well. So we need to make sure we have a robust supply chain. One thing I didn't realize, one of the issues holding up production of oil is supply chain issues, that a lot of the drilling companies are having problems getting components and parts for their equipment. So that's kind of hindering production. Making sure we have an all of the above energy strategy, so that we're still making absolute and the best use of our oil reserves here in the US, but also trying to reduce the demand on the oil reserves by having renewable energy as well, biofuels, ethanol, making sure we have wind and solar power to help reduce some of the natural gas demand. Because just like anything else, having a diverse portfolio of energy, just like you'd want a diverse portfolio of investments, that's always going to be better for us in the long term.
You mentioned ethanol, and since you're a farm kid, you would have a little better understanding on this. And full disclosure, I've worked on the issue. E15 is available for any car that has been out since 2001. So why aren't we seeing more federal push to require oil companies to blend more ethanol that one helps domestically and reduces some of that foreign pressure, and two, I know nobody loves mandates, especially in the Republican Party, but it's not like oil companies are just going to simply say out of the kindness of their heart, well, sure, we'll sell more ethanol, but less oil.
Yeah, and that's true. And Yeah, we have to look at those requirements, even though, as you said, people don't like mandates. There are different pushes, and I'd like to see even us beyond ethanol as well. I'd look at, or at least corn-based ethanol. I'd like to look at other fuel sources as well, cellulose, sugarcane ethanol, and things like that. So we have to promote and offer incentives. This is the big thing that I look at from a Republican standpoint is regulate. We should always focus on innovation rather than regulation, and incentivizing rather than penalizing. And so I think that's it. I think we need to make sure we're offering, if we're offering subsidies or whatever, have that ethanol requirement be tied to it. So things like that, I think, are ways we can kind of push that a little further.
And before we let you go, you got the sign behind you that has the space theme. A lot of folks probably don't know that you worked for SpaceX.
Yep. So yeah, I was aerospace engineer by training. U of I did aerospace engineering. Did worked for a few years at Boeing. Took a break from engineering to go into education, and taught high school for 4 years at a low-income charter school. Then I wanted to go to SpaceX, and that was an incredible opportunity. And that's an idea of innovation. You had Elon come in there. Excuse me, Elon come in there. Everyone telling him, "Hey, you can't do this. This is the way the government's always done things at NASA and stuff." And he said, "No, we're going to innovate. We're going to do something different." And you can see what SpaceX has done over the last 15, 20 years. And I was happy to be a part of that. Kind of miss it because I had the opportunity. I was there for 3 years, but then had the opportunity to go down to Columbia to join the YMCA down there. And it was one of those, hey, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to go and travel the world. So got to spend a year traveling the world and doing nonprofit work. But yeah, I always appreciate that time at SpaceX, and that I got to give my hats off to the marketing team that came up with the logo.
Matt Houseman, candidate for Congress. Where do people find you online?
So yeah, housemanforcongress.com, and then we're on Facebook, Twitter, all that, and encourage people to check us out and hopefully get involved.
Matt, I appreciate it. Good luck. Now to Jesse Rising, who is another one of the Republican candidates for the 13th district. Jesse, the reality here is that the new 13th doesn't look a lot like the old 13th. And as two Central Illinois white dudes, we kind of have to realize the fact that, you know, it's a different world sometimes to walk into East St. Louis or the east side of Springfield or the north side of Champaign. How does a white male conservative relate to people who don't necessarily look like or agree with the things you talk about?
Yeah, so as you mentioned or alluded to, the Mike Madigan machine redrew the 13th congressional district to try to favor a handpicked Democratic candidate. So they've basically put as many Democrats as possible into the 13th, spanning from Champaign, Urbana, through my hometown of Decatur, over to Springfield, and then down to East St. Louis in the Metro East area. But I'm someone who, you know, my family's been in Decatur and in this district for almost 200 years. I'm a public school kid from this district. This district, you know, made me into the man I am. And, you know, you mentioned the minority population throughout our district. You know, the public school system I went to, we had roughly equal numbers of black and white kids, and we all sort of just struggled together, you know, and we didn't, you know, worry too much about things like race or the differences between us. We kind of just came together as friends and neighbors and as a community. And you know, that's, you know, an integral part of who I am. And then you look at the problems that our country is facing right now. Those problems don't respect the racial barriers, so to speak. They affect all Americans. The out of control inflation that we're experiencing, the heightened crime rates, the failing schools, the immigration crisis at our southern border, and the just the weakness and the incompetence that President Biden is projecting is making people feel less secure, you know, in their own backyards, and it's making us less safe on the international stage as well, with China taking advantage of our weaknesses, both economically and gaining military advantage over us.
I have a lot of issues I want to get to with you. So let's start with guns. Obviously, it's the top of the news cycle over the last few weeks after the the latest shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Nobody wants this sort of thing to happen. No fierce, not even the fiercest supporter of the Second Amendment wants anyone to go into a school and kill kids. But we also have to recognize, right, that there's a problem here. Whether it's with, you know, AR Armalite style rifles, whether it's 5.56 rounds, whether it's not good enough background checks or red flag laws. Everyone has to admit, in my opinion, as someone who's pro-gun but also pro-gun control, that there has to be some step taken to help stop this crisis, right?
Yeah, you know, there's no question that you know, we have a mental health crisis in this country right now, and I think that's really at the foundation of these problems that we're having with not only with mass shootings but with other types of crime as well. You know, you go back to Columbine in the 90s. You know, our country has really been facing an escalating mental health crisis with rising so-called deaths of despair, where we've seen increasing deaths from suicide, from drug overdoses. We just hit a record drug overdoses last year, many of them coming from synthetic opioids like fentanyl, and even deaths from things like alcoholism and substance abuse disorder have been rising since the 90s in tandem with the rise in these mass shootings. So I think that's really, you know, sort of at the core of the problem here. And we need, you know, communities to come together, because we have, you know, less participation in civic organizations, less church attendance, and you know, without these strong communities, we have people turning to the dark corners of the internet, and especially during the pandemic, people became even more isolated and don't have healthy outlets in their communities to turn to, and that's why we're seeing some of these challenges that we're seeing today.
I appreciate the pivot, but specifically, what would or could you support? Because however a solution is found, it's going to have to be Republicans and Democrats meeting in the middle. What would you support in terms of gun control? Is it universal background checks? Is it a stronger red flag law? What would you support?
Well, you know, we saw that, you know, in Buffalo, for example, you know, they have red flag laws, and that didn't, you know, stop the shooting there. So, you know, again, I think we need stronger communities that are, you know, speaking up when they see, you know, a member of their community who's unwell, and maybe engaging in this rhetoric that they're going to, you know, shoot up a school or a grocery store. And, you know, we do have, you know, robust gun control measures here in the state of Illinois. And, you know, ultimately, you know, I'm a constitutional conservative, and I believe in the people's right to keep and bear arms. That is a fundamental right that Americans have. So I think we really need to think holistically about the solutions here to these problems. And I think, again, that goes back to addressing the mental health crisis that we have in this country. And that starts with our communities, but we can also look at, you know, what we can be doing to improve mental health services as well.
I want to move on to abortion, just because that's, you know, really become a huge issue again now that the Supreme Court had the leaked memo or the leaked decision on Roe. Obviously, as an attorney, you've been in plenty of con law classes, I'm sure. So, one, what's your take on what you saw? And two, what would be the role for Congress if you were there in 2013 or 2023? Sorry, we're sneaking back 10 years. What would be your sense of the role Congress should play moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, of course, the leak of the draft opinion, in my view, represents an egregious attempt to undermine our institutions of justice. You know, I clerked for a couple of federal judges, and it's really unfathomable for me to think about how this opinion could have been leaked, because the justices should be deciding based on the rule of law and the Constitution, not based on public pressure. And of course, now we've seen Justice Kavanaugh having his life threatened after, Senator Schumer had previously stood on the steps of the Supreme Court and, engaging in very destructive rhetoric. And I think you can draw a line from that rhetoric to what happened at Kavanaugh's home. But this draft opinion does arrive at what I believe is the correct decision from a constitutional perspective. There is no constitutional right to abortion. The people should be deciding questions about life and abortion through their democratically elected legislatures. And that's what this draft opinion does. It restores the power of the people to enact policy through their votes and through their democratically elected legislatures. And that is where I believe the decision should be made. And so as a member of Congress, I'm proudly pro-life. And of course, in the state of Illinois, we have some of the most aggressively liberal abortion policies, not just in the country, but really anywhere in the world even. So as a congressman, I'm going to evaluate, we'll take a look at what the opinion ultimately says, and then we're going to evaluate how we can implement pro-life policies that protect the sanctity of life.
Gasoline nowadays, $5 a gallon in a lot of places downstate, pushing $6 in Chicago and the suburbs, or even over $6 now. What should Congress be doing? Obviously, the federal gas tax is a part of the conversation. One would think the oil supplies, whether the strategic petroleum reserves or where you get it from, or how you handle the supply. What would be your plan to get these gas prices down, because they're causing real harm to families across the state?
Yeah, we need to end this war that President Biden has been waging on the oil and gas industry. I mean, he said when he was a candidate that he was going to end fossil fuels. And then when he was elected, shut down the Keystone XL pipeline. And my Democratic opponent, Nikki Budzinski, actually had a hand in shutting down the Keystone XL pipeline, which killed jobs right here in central Illinois, in addition to limiting our supply. And we've got to. We also heard President Biden praising the high gas prices as a period of, quote, incredible transition. So look, I believe that we do have space to think about an eventual transition to renewable energy. But the timeline on which the Green New Deal activists are trying to push that agenda down our throat is completely unrealistic and is now fueling these high gas prices. And of course, we've seen President Biden also halting new oil and gas leases. So what we need to do is unleash the American energy market, and particularly with respect to oil and gas. And that means leases and permits and pipelines and drilling.
What about short term, though? Would you support a temporary repeal of the federal gas tax?
Yeah, I'm for lowering taxes across the board, and I would absolutely support lowering or reducing the gas tax as well.
And before we go, I did want to ask really quickly about the international stage, and people are talking less about Ukraine, now that we have the news cycle paying attention like squirrels. But the idea that we are watching the Putin regime take over an ally slowly, day by day. How can we be comfortable with allowing that to happen? Is there a role for the U.S. to play to stop this, whether that means boots on the ground or not?
Yeah, I think unfortunately President Biden, botched the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and I had been there as a civilian back in 2011, 2012, and President Putin was watching that botched withdrawal, and so it's no surprise that he felt emboldened by the weakness and incompetence that President Biden has been projecting to then invade Ukraine. And I do believe that we owe it to our Ukrainian allies to stand by them and provide them with the aid and support that they need. And, President Zelensky has really served as a model for what real leadership looks like, because he had an opportunity to flee his country, but he didn't do that. And he's been fighting bravely alongside his fellow citizens in the Ukraine. But unfortunately, we have been put in this very difficult situation with Ukraine because of President Biden's weakness and incompetence. And by the way, it wasn't just Putin who was watching, it was also President Xi in China. And so now it remains to be seen whether he's going to act on Taiwan as well. So we need to be monitoring the situation there very closely as well, because we can't have in the 21st century foreign dictators invading sovereign nations like we've seen.
Jesse Rising, Republican candidate in the new 13th district. Jesse, how do people find your campaign?
Yeah, check us out at jesserising.com. That's JESSEREISING.com.
Jesse, appreciate the time. Thank you.